All right, and we are live. So, hey everyone, thanks for those who are tuning in. If you guys are just now jumping onto the stream, or if you're going to be watching us afterwards, thanks for tuning in. This has been a great adventure, and this is kind of the next start, the next chapter for the Dying Breed and for. Um, just being an author and helping out fellow authors. So today I have a special guest, John A. Douglas, who I found John through Facebook, which he is mostly a Twitter guy and some other social medias, but he posted in a Facebook group saying, "Hey, I'm doing an interview with a fellow author, Tim Akers," and so I jumped on and really liked John's his show, what he was about, and some of those things. So I asked him to come on and do a live stream with me. So John, if you would, please give us kind of your introduction, who you are, what you're about, and some of the projects that you're working on.
Oh, thank you, TJ. I appreciate it, man. I'm author John A. Douglas. I've been a writer for about 30 years now, but since 1993, 92. My dad sold his beloved 68 Chevelle for a family computer, our first family computer. And it had one of the earliest iterations of Microsoft Word on it. And I just thought to myself one day, like, I'm going to try and I was gonna essentially I was writing fan fiction. I was like I'm gonna try and write like novelized versions of video game plots. I was 13 at the time, so this made a lot of sense back then.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
unfortunate and naturally wasn't good, but I was a hobby writer for most of the 90s and then going into the 2000s as well, especially once I discovered the internet and I started posting stories and stuff online. I just reached this point eventually where I thought to myself, I'm getting kind of pretty decent at this. I got people that like what I'm writing. I should probably transition to, I got the dream to become a novelist, and then I started working on that, and then I wrote books, and I wrote books and half abandoned books, and then I wrote some first novels that are not very good, and it's probably best that they died on the computer that I lost in the flood back in
Okay.
2016. So I'm coming up on I've got several novels in the pipeline at the moment. The first one that I've got is planned to, the release date is to be determined at the moment. Unfortunately, I had to pull back on the soft release of it in August on my birthday, August 5th, because I was not able to get a cover artist that could do a really good cover in time. And since I primarily write in epic fantasy, anyone who knows fantasy knows that the cover is the thing that sells your book. Like this 90% of your marketing right there. So I
Yeah.
was like, well, shoot, I have to delay the book a little bit more. And I've been talking about it for a while. But
And this is the Black Crown, correct?
yes, the Black Crown. But my dad always said you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So the cover's that important. I'm going to delay it just a little bit longer, later this year, with a few more in the pipeline.
Okay, so a few more books, as in, is the Black Crown looking at becoming a series? Is it going to be within the same world? Like what spoilers or snacks can you give us to excite us?
What I'm planning on is Allspire is a fantasy world. Allspire is the setting, and this is going to be the setting for a lot of the projects that I'm working on in the future. The
Mm-hmm.
Black Crown is one entry point. Book 2 is called The Lionheart. The Black Crown is more of an epic fantasy.
Okay.
The Lionheart is a superhero story set in the same world in another part of it. So that's a second entry point into
Interesting.
Allspire. I have a third entry point book that I have dreamed up. I've got to work on that. And one of my friends, Royce from the channel A Drink with Crazy,
Mm-hmm.
he's real big on leaving a legacy to our kids. I got some young reader novels that I want to set in the same world. So I got a
Right.
lot of plates spinning at the moment on top of you guys can catch me on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey, although Odyssey's kind of flagging at the moment as John A. Douglas.
Yep.
And you can
And
find me.
for all of our watchers, John's links are down in the description. So make
Thank you,
sure you
sir.
guys go to all that. And we actually have quite a few other links that we'll talk about here in a second. But yeah, all of John's stuff should be down there. So please make sure you go follow him and support him as he continues this epic journey. Because he's got some really cool stuff. And I really like what you're doing, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the thing that I picked up as I started getting, it started back in about 2019, 2020, right? When I was finally settling on the story of the Black Crown to be, okay, this is the one that I'm going to work on and focus on being as professional and good as possible and start sending to publishers. Because that
Okay.
was always the dream, to be published by to be a published author. We all
Right.
had that. And it was about that time, the kind of changes that we've been seeing in our mainstream culture were very prevalent in the publishing industry as well. I didn't realize it. When I started looking up some independent fantasy novels on Facebook, inevitably the algorithm said, "Oh, you like indie fantasy books? Here's some more," and it started putting ads for more of them in front of my face. And the artwork was what caught my eye. I was like, "Oh, wow!" Now, initially, when self-publishing started up on Amazon, my reaction was what a lot of people's was, well, it's just going to be a bunch of shovelware. It'll be a bunch of amateurs with no editing and no quality control, shoveling out a bunch of dreck you'll, even if you write something good, it'll get lost in the pile. And I think for a while that was the case. But
Hmm.
as the Macho Man Randy Savage always said, the cream always rises to the top. And inevitably, that's what happened. Is you had a resurgence of people who just kind of decided they would rather self-publish than try to go
Hmm.
the traditional publishing route. And so a lot of really, really good authors started to materialize, and they put good money into editing and book covers for their work. And so they started to become prominent, and I started to follow a lot of them and see what they were doing. And this was happening concurrently at the same time as that was my son waving at me, by the way. Don't mind me.
It's
My
all good.
my YouTube space is in the corner of my bedroom, so occasionally I get traffic through here. So if you hear something, don't worry about it. Uh, Concurrently, as this was, I was starting to take notice of indie fantasy and how much there was and how more popular it was getting. The declining quality of what we were getting from mainstream Hollywood in movies and comics, books, television shows was just drastically going down. And I was becoming more and more disheartened and disenfranchised with what they were making. Not just that they had decided to take the course that was more fueled by ESG than anything, but the fact that so much of it really just wasn't that good. And a lot of people like to point and say you're just an old fuddy duddy. You just like what you liked back in your day, and you just don't like new stuff. And it's not really the case. Like, we know it's bad because we've seen what's good. We've seen stuff much better, and can objectively tear down why a lot of this newer entertainment is just objectively bad.
Right.
And
I
that's what
mean,
I
I,
started
I think
doing.
that would be like, oh, you don't like new stuff. I'm sorry. Umbrella Academy, epic, in my opinion. Love
Right.
Umbrella Academy.
And I'm not saying
Stranger Things,
there's not
there's
exceptions, but they are
right.
exceptions.
There's absolutely exceptions, but I think, like you said, there's times where we're seeing these stories where it's like, really? Like, this is it? This is what you're
Yeah,
trying to sell me as good right now?
that's the thing that frustrates me the most is you get casuals and normies and people who just they have no concept of quality control or critical thinking. They just watch stuff and watch it, and complete turn your brain off. I only turn my brain off for Godzilla movies. Sorry. But when it comes to other things that I enjoy, when they start when they start telling disjointed stories that contradict prior entries, they don't respect the lore. And even worse, probably the one thing that angers me the most is blaming the fans, blaming the fans when it doesn't work, telling fans they're toxic, telling fans that they are not uh they should just shut up and accept what they're given. I can't jive with that. I can't vibe with people that just say shut up and just enjoy things. I don't like the just enjoy things crowd, right?
Yeah. Well, you at
So
least have another Godzilla fan with you with Jane Moorteeth here. So
yes,
she loves
uh
it.
there's this part of my this part of my brain that's perpetually 13 years old, and I don't care if it's if it, if it's giant monsters and giant robots, I'm just there and I just enjoy it. I don't even remember what the humans were doing in the last couple Godzilla films. I know they were there,
Right.
but uh, these are the kind of giant monster, giant robot movies that I wanted when I was a kid, and uh, I enjoy the hell out of them. I don't know what's
Yep.
going on in them, but hey,
You
I
know,
don't care.
it's
That's the only
uh,
thing I turn my brain off for. Everything else gets my full criticism.
right. And I think, we're kind of getting to a good segue here. And one of the things that, when you and I, oh, Jane, what do you got for us, Jane? I'm happy to see any giant lizard destroying civilization. It's a great documentary. Oh, absolutely. I think I loved Pacific Rim,
Yes.
the first one. The second
Oh,
one, I
they
felt like they
bungled
just
it
tried too
so
hard.
badly.
I was like, "Are you serious? Like, you guys had this epic movie that truly, like, blew me away in expectations, and then you give me movie number 2, which okay, yep, yep, I'll
That
just
was
go back to 1 and
that
keep
happened.
rewatching 1."
Yeah, that happened.
So,
Oh, talk about snatching victory from the jaws of defeat.
yep. So,
Or is it the other way
good
around?
segue for us here, and one of the things too is, like, viewers is, when so I asked John to come on and do a live with me, and then the funny thing was I think it was literally later that day when you messaged me and say, "Hey, dude, you want to come on my show? I got a space to fill." So I interviewed, or John interviewed me first, and then he came on. But one of the things we talked about in the stream, at least beforehand, I think, was, even if we have a difference of opinion, we can still respect one another and say, "Hey, that's your opinion. I don't see it the same way, and we're the same." So, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about was kind of what you mentioned earlier, where there was a post you had seen on social media, specifically in regards to some books, but it was basically what I think you called labeling, where that person had just said, "Oh, this book doesn't have XYZ, therefore don't read it." Can you kinda, like, talk to us about that? What exactly was that, and some of your concerns, especially in the indie world, but going forward with kinda this shift that you're seeing?
The tweet that I had seen initially was, I think it was about a sensitivity readers, if I'm not mistaken.
That was it, yep.
And it was it led to a conversation. I run in a lot of circles. One of the circles I'm kind of the bastard stepchild in the tertiary orbit of is the kind of fantasy booktuber community, and a lot of the really good uh, top epic fantasy that's in the indie sphere is kind of floating around in that area. Really good authors. Um, and everybody was kind of having it, kind of set off a bit of a firestorm about whether or not a sensitivity reader is needed. And ultimately, I say, write what you want. And, you know, if you feel like you don't want to drive off readers with something that might be too much for some of them, this might apply to more grimdark authors than, say romance authors. But it set off that kind of conversation about whether do you need a sensitivity reader, or but the way the initial tweet was selling services for sensitivity readers, and it was worded in such a way that was basically like, look, you don't want to accidentally come off as you don't want to accidentally come off as an ist or a phobe, or triggering to these communities, do you? You need a sensitivity reader to do this. And that kind of smacked me in the face of a bit of a protection market, a protection racket. It's mafioso style. That's a nice book. See, you wouldn't want anything bad to happen to it.
Mm,
See, you wouldn't want the review community to turn their back on you and not give you any exposure. See, that kind of thing. So that was, but you and I don't know which, I think you're younger than me a little bit. It's kind of, there's been a lot of cultural change since when I was a kid compared to some other people that are younger than me. I'm of a certain vintage of, we kind of ate shock and awe for breakfast.
I mean,
We
I was the kind where we were still throwing rocks at one another for a little bit of time there.
Yeah,
So,
that pre-internet era, like there was no, I mean, I come from the era where they had to invent new ratings for kids movies because some movies were PG and they were definitely should have been PG-13 based on stuff they had in them.
So, you bring up so you bring up that point of like, oh well, you should make sure you get our stamp of approval before you go forward with
Yeah,
that. And for me,
very
in book
passive aggressive.
very passive aggressive. And for me, in book 2, I put a content warning at the very beginning, right? Not only do I put a mature rating on the back of my books or a rating on the back of my books as an indie publisher to say, here's what's covered, but in book 2, the very first page right before chapter 1, content warning for this. And I even say, this is not to trigger any post or past events that you've experienced. It is simply to bring XYZ into the light, something of that nature. So authors have that. But to have someone say, "Oh, well, we should put our stamp of approval on it first,"
Right.
is a really interesting take on trying to, I don't want to say bully, but very passive aggressively say, you need to toe the line with what we think should be in your book.
Well, that's just the thing. In a way, it is kind of bullying because it's people that are trying to filter your content through their lens in order
Mm,
to give it a stamp of approval to an audience that frankly they're not promising they're going to deliver to you. That's kind of how the tweet was worded. Um, and it's too far in the past for me to go find it.
right.
Uh, but when it comes to me, that just I always remember this one line from a comedy special a long time ago. I never forgot this. If you remember the Kings of Comedy, there was a counter production to it called the Queens of Comedy. It was
Okay.
about four, and there was a comedian in there named her name was Laura Hayes, and she mentioned that somebody came up to her after a show and told her, said, "I think you're so funny, but you have got a filthy mouth." And she took umbrage to that, and she said, "That is a person that is trying to control you,
Mm,
to police what you're doing to fit their needs and their sensibilities." As an author, I believe that you write what you want, your audience is going to find you. Uh, Essentially, and when you make yourself the brand of the face of your own books, you kind of filter in people who are like-minded and enjoy that kind of thing. The ones that don't like it, they were never going to like it whether you had a content warning or not.
mm,
Um, from my perspective, like if they saw that content warning and the content warning was like warning, has graphic depictions of violence, they said, "Well, that's not for me." They were not going to like it whether they read it or not. You know what I'm saying? They were gonna
yeah.
they've already kind of taken themselves out of your customer pool.
Right.
But somebody else may look at that and say, may come across that graphic violence, they're not bothered by it. So
Let's see
from my
what looks like Jane had a comment as well. It's ridiculous. Portnoy's complaint can misuse a piece of beef liver, but you can't put a content warning.
Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports,
That's what I'm assuming here. So
uh, I kind of I kind of tuned out of Dave Portnoy when he had that feud with Alex Stein. Like, dude, take a joke. Oh, okay, so it's something else.
okay, yeah.
That's just as well. I was tired of watching him. I was tired of watching his pizza reviews anyway. One bite, everyone
So
knows the rule, and he takes like 5 bites.
right. And so now it's interesting because so you and I had talked on our stream about, the COVID times, some of that stuff and stock market. Oh, uh Jane says it's an older novel
Oh,
and has a lot of graphic sexual content, but widely considered a classic.
oh, right.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for the context, Jane. It's
I'll have
awesome.
to look that up.
Um, so COVID happened, right? The lockdown started
Unfortunately,
and we all had to adjust. Well, for me, I started watching some social media content, and I'm just going to call this person Delta. Now, when I first found Delta, they only had 40,000 subscribers. Now, granted, as you know, and many of us know, 40,000 is a lot of subscribers. That is a huge accomplishment in itself. Delta's channel was very much a hot topic of research and looking into during the COVID timeframe, to where now today Delta has over 200,000 subscribers. Delta also started a business, his brand, and his company right now is worth about $2 million. So
Hmm.
he has continued to do some really great stuff. But one of the things that I loved about Delta at the very beginning stage, when I got in with that 40,000, I got to know him, talk to him behind the scenes. I was there for him a couple of times when he just needed someone to talk to and hear the stressors he had. But there was a fellow social media content person, we'll just say Foxtrot, that decided to leak an email that was sent to Delta and about 29 other content creators. And this person, of course, called out Delta and just said, look, you posted a video, you created a video, and you were offered anywhere from $10 to $20,000 for that video, and you never told your audience that it was a promotional video. And so that started the conversation where Delta really reflected and said, you know what, I am going to be a person who's transparent, and I've decided that I am not going to be that type of a social media content performer. But in the background, with his Patreon and Discord, he started to share a few of these other emails where he would say, hey, if you see this company start to come up on the YouTube channels, just know they reached out and offered me $12,000 for one video. And so, sure enough, that next week, you started to see at least 5 or 6 people, because of that algorithm change, started to push this company or a company. And it was very interesting of, hey, when you start to have a social media presence, and you start to kind of have that these people look at you as an influencer, there is money sometimes coming in behind the scenes. So now we have, as you and I are authors, this is, a career path that we are going down. When you have people who are doing book reviews and they have a very large presence, it's like, have we done the critical thinking to ask ourselves, is there money behind this deal? Is there something behind this deal? How genuine is this? And I don't know what I have one or two people here.
I said reset a password.
Hang on. My wife decided to come in here and ask me a question real quick.
Okay, so I'll just keep going. So
Yeah, go
so
ahead. I'll give you. I'll answer you in just a second. I'm sorry.
yep. No, you're good, brother. So I'm at Phoenix Fan Fusion, which was an awesome time, absolutely wonderful time. Met some incredible people, and I had two different people come up to my booth. Um, I had Jane, who does the book and beverage review, and the way she approached me was, "Hey, is this your book?" And of course, I said, "Yeah." And so you're the author? Yes. Please tell me about your book.
Hold on, let me see
And
it.
so I gave her the pitch, and then it was, okay, tell me about yourself, who you are, what's your story, this. And then she said, can I take a picture of you standing by the map of your world, which is right there? So after all these questions, I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting.
Where's
She
my
then gives
key?
me a card and just says, I'm a book reviewer, and I would love to do a review on your book. And I
Hold
was
on,
like, of course,
Evan.
blown away, right? But I thought, that's the book reviewer that I want reviewing my book. That's the person I want, because they showed up, asked me what the book was about, asked me who I was as an author, and wanted to know me. And then I went to Jane's Instagram, and there you see photos of, hey, I'm at this book signing with this author. Oh, I'm over here at this table with this author. I'm like, that's the people that we should be turning to and looking towards,
Yeah.
not people who are kind of, you never see them interacting with authors. You never actually see them.
There's my buddy Kyle from Facebook on my
Hey,
friends list. Hey,
what's up,
Kyle. Good
Kyle?
to see you, dude. Uh, I have a video. If you go on my YouTube channel, I have a video that is becoming very evergreen lately, called
What's up, Ryan?
the new gold standard.
Okay.
Uh, Authenticity and genuineness is the gold standard for indie creators now. Okay, it really is, because it's trafficked in truth. in
Yep.
people's actual genuine interest, and it's eschewing the kind of corporate side of things. Think about the big geek sites, right? They don't get paid technically by Disney or the MCU for their glowing or their overly praising glowing reviews of their really garbage movies that they've been making for the past couple years. But what do they get? They get early access, they get behind the scenes looks, they get invited to the premieres, and then coincidentally, stuff like the Eternals and She-Hulk get glowing reviews from people who say, "Oh, the toxic fans are just being toxic. This is actually really good." And you'll notice it's not until months after those reviews actually matter that the truth starts to come out, where you'll start seeing reviews going, "Hey, can we talk about how She-Hulk was real?" You saw this with Rings of Power. You saw this where every media site under the sun just absolute glowing praise for this series right up until about 2 weeks after the final episode. And then what happened was people started to kind of sideline and go, "Well, okay, so they could improve some things. Okay, it might not have been that great." And then the news dropped a few weeks ago that of all the people that watched the Rings of Power on Amazon Prime, only about 70% of them actually 70% of them didn't go past the first 1 or 2 episodes, right?
Right. It was only
That's
30%
devastating.
that actually stayed with the series.
And that is, I mean, that's devastating. And some of us fans,
Please don't mention She-Hulk, Kyle says.
Critical Drinker said something not too long ago. Can I curse on here? Is that okay?
Oh, I don't care.
Oh, fuck yeah.
This is
All right.
rated R for reality and
Yes.
R for real.
So Critical Drinker said something in a recent video I think is probably one of the most poignant and true statements about a lot of normie tastes these days. Some people have eaten shit for so long that they've convinced themselves that they like the taste.
That's also
And
a military
I've
thing.
been ahead of the curve on this. You can ask Kyle, my friend right down there. I have been ranting and raving about a lot of this garbage for a long time before a lot of people even realized how bad it was. Ask him. Star Wars, the MCU. I've been in the process of just becoming completely disenfranchised from these projects, and now that I don't even want to. Now, whenever a video pops up on my YouTube feed says, "Did you know in Star Wars?" I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know anymore. I don't even. It's made me retroactively not like things that I used to like.
Right.
That's why I like the indies so much, because they have the gold standard that I mentioned: genuineness, authenticity, actual heart, that X factor that you can't define. That's what's in them, and that's what draws me to the indies. And that's why I made the switch in the last couple of years to go, I'm just going to go indie. I might still try and get a traditional publisher, because it would be great to get paid to write so that I could not have to worry about a job and do this full time. But I'm still going to be self-publishing everything that I have from here on out, whether it gets picked up or not.
So I think
you
brought up the gold standard of like authors, right? Being authentic and genuine, but that's the same thing with what we see with Jane and her book reviews, where she's going up and meeting the authors. She's doing that stuff. Then we have Carson Lacey, who's got Troy Online, and he's going out. He did an interview with Tim Akers like you did. He is going around and doing the same thing. He was the second person that came up to my booth. And I was like, "Hey, dude, who are you? Tell me about your book. Tell me about you." Hands me the card. He's like, "You know what? I'm a podcaster. I want to do an episode with you." And I was like, "Dude, that's awesome." And so we have people like Carson, people like Katie and David Room, I believe, or Rome.
Yeah, I think it's Rome.
With Periapis Press, I think is how we call it.
Yeah, they're friends of the channel. I know them both well. Katie actually has a copy of the Black Crown. I hope she's enjoying it.
Yeah. So just like we should have a gold standard with authors that are authentic and genuine, the same people that we just mentioned, and everyone, their links are down below. Please be sure to go link and follow and support them. Those are the same people that are genuine, authentic. And it's like, hey, we want to bring you authors and stories that we know are of this genuine quality.
Yeah.
So Let's
That is
see.
the gold standard, and that's because what that leads to is the organic grassroots style fan base. And the
Yep.
more fan bases are disintegrated and dissolved and disenfranchised by mainstream, the more they're going to go, well, Star Wars sucks. Now, who's got something that's like Star Wars that I could? Oh, TJ's got a Star Wars project. I know. I got a whole lot of. I could bring up a book for anything, uh, for anyone's particular tastes, but that's it's such a my brain's malfunctioning. Hold on a second.
Well, here, think about
you
that.
you were,
And
you were asking now. You were asking me earlier. Hold on a second. You were asking me earlier about reviewers asking behind the scenes money changing hands. That's not even changing hands. That's not even new. Like that's
yeah,
payola. That's the old school old school music producers and directors handing radio DJs hey, here's my guy's new single, and there's like $100 in the singles disc, and so they just naturally decide, hey, we found this guy out of nowhere and we're going to play him. If I'm not mistaken, that was oh god, who was that? One of them sold out that whole business and it got changed and upended.
interesting.
I think it was Casey Kasem, actually. That's why he stayed on the air for years, and a lot of 70s DJs didn't. But that's all ancient history at this point. But it's still
Right.
it's pay to play.
Oh, absolutely.
And thankfully, I think most genuine and authentic reviewers that I know do not engage in that, from my perspective.
Right.
I always believe in don't say anything behind the scenes that you don't want to leak out into the light of day. So, again, being a genuine and authentic is always going to pay dividends. I'm nothing as authentic as I possibly can be. I review books because I like reading books. I love fantasy books. I've always loved them for a long time, and I'm always been passionate about my interests. So this is just an extension of something I've done for a long time anyway.
Right. Jane, we've had it here. I don't even know how to say that.
Halloweeny, I think.
Halloweeny said this about his Aragon films that came out. The people who made the film didn't love the series, so it was terrible. So now he's looking for diehard fans for the Disney Plus series. And
I heard that movie stunk. I never watched it.
I never watched
I know
it.
in the movie critic circles, it was a punching bag for a while, but I'm glad he's getting a chance to do over and do it over the way he wants. That's what I think every author should have the chance to do. Get their stuff adapted the way they want to.
Well, I think I was actually talking about this with my mother earlier. I said, look at Batman. Batman started with a TV show, and then it had another show, and then another movie, and then this. Almost all these, comic books or some of the even movies, hey, we put out this movie 40, 50 years ago. No one really remembers it. It was so bad that we've tried to hide it now from public view, because the new project that we're doing is actually capturing, what we did. George Lucas. Hey, I did the original Star Wars. You know what? I've added a little bit of content because it's now able to capture the scene with that little extra touch that I wanted to do back then, but I didn't. And so I think as creators, there's nothing wrong with at least saying, hey, like, especially with covers, how many covers of Lord of the Rings has there been since it was originally published? There's people that literally like, oh, I just picked up Lord of the Rings again because it's this new cover and I want it for my collection.
That's what I got right here. This was a Christmas gift from my wife. This is beautiful. This one right here, I forgot it was what it was, some kind of 75-year anniversary edition. It comes with a map. It comes with all kinds of, oh god, this thing is gorgeous. It's got illustrations by Tolkien in it.
It almost looks like a Bible the way that.
Oh, dude, this thing is beautiful. I bought it because I had an omnibus of the Lord of the Rings at one point, and I said, I want to read. I've got to finish reading this. I stopped at about Return of the King, but this was beautiful. And then I realized, dang, this is so beautiful. I can't just read the books with this.
Right.
I don't want to damage that. It's special.
So it also, okay, so now we can move on to what you've referred to as the Iron Age. What
Yes.
exactly is the Iron Age? What is this movement? What is this kind of collection of creators, and where do you see this movement going? I guess I
Uh, the,
could call it a movement, but
yeah, it in a little bit. It's YouTuber Razorfist kind of he didn't coin the phrase, but he kind of catapulted it into prominence. In that, if you look at the age of entertainment that we're in, like a comic book age, movements don't come in gates or movements of different natures. They come in ages, right? You had the golden age of comics, the silver age of comics. Uh, he accurately described where we're in, what we're in right now as the Iron Age, being that the creation, the creative impetus for entertainment that we've got going on in the underbelly underneath the mainstream is the Iron Age. We're not as pretty or presentable as gold or silver, but we are hardened by the fires that we have to go through. We've got the tools right now better than at any point in history to create something and get it into the hands of people who want to read it. Thanks to Amazon's self-publishing apparatus and the proliferation of online crowdfunding and things of that nature, anybody can make a comic, an independent comic now. It used to require a lot of money and investment. It still requires some money and investment, but it used to be much harder. Now the distribution model goes through online and people are taking advantage of it. And so many people like myself are disenfranchised from the things we loved because it's been sabotaged by people who are more corporate driven, corporate minded, and they're not looking at it from the perspective of a fan. They're looking at it from the perspective, well, what can I do to put my stamp on Star Wars, shoving in and changing things about the lore and shoving things in there that don't make sense. And the just enjoy things crowd tells you, just shut up and enjoy it. But people obviously aren't. You have split fan bases, and inevitably what happens is when you get enough disgruntled fans who want the thing they enjoy to work and to be productive and entertaining again, and they're not getting that from what they liked, they're going to do it themselves. And there's precedent in history for corporations messing up so badly that they end up creating their own competition. Some of the best animated movies of the 80s were done by Don Bluth, who was a disgruntled Disney cartoonist who did not like the way they did business and didn't like how he was disrespected while he was there. And Disney floundered in the 80s in a lot of ways, and Don Bluth just steamrolled them. I don't know what happened to his movies in the 90s, but he lost the touch. But that's a different thing. Look at the creation of AEW by a lot of people who are disgruntled with how WWE just had a chokehold on the industry. There was no competition, so they created their own competition. Image Comics was formed by former Marvel and DC illustrators and writers who were tired of the way they were treated in those companies. Pathfinder by Paizo was created because people did not like 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and so Paizo basically took the old OGL license and created what is more or less a standardized version of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 in the form of Pathfinder. And that's branched out into Pathfinder 2nd edition and Starfinder, a sci-fi spinoff, which you can see all that. You can see all that behind me. Starfinder is a good game. That's where we are in the Iron Age. You have creators creating for themselves and for an audience that's hungry for something that's not made by people that hate them. And very obviously in the news, these people in mainstream say that they hate people. They hate their fans, and they come out and they blast the fans and then wonder why the fans are not showing up for all this.
right.
That's where we are with the Iron Age. The Iron Age is creators creating for themselves, inspired by things that were better than what we've been given. And we've got a lot of creators in the Iron Age who have taken up that mantle and flag and started to run with it. A couple of channels that I follow are Iron Age Media, where they're just about to put out Anvil Magazine, which is the first Iron Age magazine, which I helped back and fund. There's another channel that's more or less Iron Age Central called A Drink with Crazy, hosted by a dude named Royce, really nice guy. And every week he does he realized he's not a creator. This is one of the best things about the Iron Age that Razorfist spotlighted, is the fact that we don't just need more creators. We need the apparatuses by which people can go to find the creators, and where they can read and review the creators, where they can, have a place to go where these independent creators are congregating. And to that end, Iron Age Media has a website, and they have short stories and reviews of independent books. You have the crowdfunding, the crowdfunding site Fund My Comic, which isn't explicitly Iron Age or Comicsgate, but they recognize the need for a crowdfunding platform for comics, because you see a lot of these mainstream crowdfunding sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter booting people off, sometimes for no reason at all, sometimes for obviously political, ideological driven reasons. And Fund My Comic is there to catch people who are abandoning that particular boat. So,
Okay.
Independent creators are starting to really rise up. And I think it's inevitable that at some point, whether you call yourself Iron Age or not, an independent creator will end up breaking through into the mainstream somehow. And the mainstream Hollywood, whether it's books, comics, whatever, will start to farm in the independent scene, because the independent scene is much more creator driven, much more genuine and authentic. And hopefully some of these indie creators that get picked up will have the foresight to say no to people trying to change what they wrote or inject things that they don't want in there.
Well, I think the other thing too is when you go into the indie space, you can be a lot more shrewd as a company.
Yes,
You know,
you can be a lot more
oh,
shrewd
hey,
deciding.
you don't have a big publishing house with lawyers to review some of this stuff, so we can offer you far less than what you realize you should actually be given for your IP. So
I would take less just to have the level of creative control that I would want over my project.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's a good segue point of like creators who are coming together, who are starting to build. And again, it's not like we have the whole fortress, right? We're starting to lay a foundation to build upon, um, which is very similar to readership within the indie space. And one of the things that I've kind of felt like is that readership in indie is basically grassroots, where
Yeah.
every single reader you get is so vital to you as an author, as a creator, and hopefully your message, your material is something that they share and bring just that one other person to. So how would you see that as far as like the indie readers and them being involved in your projects?
The the readers are definitely, you've got to appeal to and write for not just yourself but your readers as well. You've got to understand your readers are an audience, and having your finger on the pulse of what your audience likes versus what they don't like, and trying to keep them as happy as possible.
Hmm.
That's a big part of it. A lot of people put their indie stuff out there, and they're writing for friends and family, and that's a big misstep, I think. Uh, we're in an area, part of one of the biggest changes that we're seeing in the Iron Age and the age of indie creators, really taking control of everything, is you've got to market yourself. You're going to have to do the marketing for yourself anyway, and unless you've got the cash to put forward and do a lot of ads on social media, which from my perspective, even though I found a lot of indie authors through those ads on Facebook, and some authors are kind of making it on Facebook. A lot of people that I've talked to when it comes to running ads on social media or Amazon, a lot of them find that it does not end up paying out for them. What I found that the people that it works for the best are the two kinds: the people who are doing what I'm doing, which is making themselves the face of their brand and their own platforms via their YouTube channels and their Twitter accounts. Guys like Eric July and Ethan Van Sciver and John Delarose. Those are the three biggest examples I like to use, because that's what they do. They get out there and they talk about the culture war stuff, and whether you care about the culture war or not is indifferent. They're out there, finding the audience that shares their views and says, "Hey, you're like-minded in what I believe. Here's something. Here's a book or a comic that I made that you'll probably like as well."
Right.
You also got some of these older guys that I call them. They crowdfund their books, right? They've got a very solid fan base that very consistently helps crowdfund their next book into being, so they can get the art and the editing done quick as possible. They make that work for them really well, and I admire that. That's not the path for me just yet, because I'm trying the first path. But making sure that you keep your readers happy, building up that readership through yourself is it kind of ties to this other video that I did sometime last year that's also evergreen. If you look on my YouTube channel, look it up. It's called The Game Has Changed. A prominent Star Wars author tweeted that she was, kind of pissed off that her big publisher, she's published with a big publishing house, Penguin Books. Her name is E.K. Johnston, and she does Star Wars books for them. She was kind of irritated that they asked her to increase her social media presence and do a little more, podcasts and things like that on YouTube with other people to kind of help market the book. She felt, and I can kind of see how she would believe this, that it's the publisher's job. The publishers should be taking the job of helping market their books, but the game has changed. They don't, unless your last name is Sanderson or Stephen King or James Patterson, you're not getting promoted by the big publishers. If you're a little name author, they're not doing as much to promote you. So really, the indie authors are taking on themselves, and they're pushing up their social media presence and doing the marketing themselves. The ones that are doing the marketing for themselves, like myself, are building up a readership and building up an audience for their projects. The audience that likes them is going to be enthusiastic for what they write. And we saw this to great success with Eric July, right? He had built an audience before he decided to make his own comic book, go his own way. And then he raised like $3.7 million for that comic. That was an insanely successful venture, all because he had an audience that was hungry for what he wanted to make. In smaller steps, indie authors do very much the same thing. We're building going out there. To me, I'm getting ahead of my own brain. Hold on, talking too fast. To me, indie creators, whether it's comics or books, going out there and putting themselves out there on social media to try and build their own audience is going to be the best way. When you're authentic and genuine, real recognize real. Real people are going to come recognize that you're genuine and authentic, and they're going to, they're naturally going to want to follow what you're doing and see what you've made, because they can tell that you're not some corpo that's hates its own fan base. That hating the fan base thing is really driving a lot of people away from these bigger IPs. I know it's one of the things that drove me. So being humble and appreciative is also a big thing.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So with that, now you're coming in. Well, so you've written for a while, but this is your first book project, The Black Crown. That is the one that you're propelling forward. This is going to happen. So what was some of the things, I guess, that really was eye-opening for you as you started to go down this path and say, we're actually pulling the trigger, we're going for this?
Well, first I had to kind of recognize that I had kind of hamstrung myself a little bit when it came to the hobby writing that I was doing was on websites like Fiction Press. That's the sister site for fanfiction.net. And it's, you kind of end up with more of a manga style of writing when you write those, because you're writing one chapter at a time. And sometimes this kind of trains a lot of people's writing brains to, not in a novel way. You're not writing to into a novel structure. You're kind of just writing. Maybe this chapter you push the plot forward a little. Maybe this chapter you just have a little filler and do some slice of life stuff. And not that there's anything wrong with slice of life stuff. I like that stuff too, but in moderation. I had to kind of unlearn that, because when I started trying to write novels, that's where I was getting hung up. I was trying to figure out how to string events together, and with The Black Crown was where it just finally clicked. And I realized that that style of writing that I've been doing for a while had kind of just hamstrung me in my growth. It's like going from training wheels to regular, going from training wheels to riding a regular bike. Inevitably you're going to wobble a little bit.
Right.
The Black Crown started, believe it or not, with one of the side characters. A little goblin named Ollie was the first thing that I came up with. I was thinking about this the other day. I thought about like one of the things that's more interesting to me is the different fantasy races. I always like playing different races in D&D, and I thought to myself, what would be the most oddball, off the wall kind of mixed parentage a fantasy character to have? And I thought, what about this little goblin girl who's got one goblin parent and one elf parent? How the hell did that happen? And so one by one measure, she's like, vulgar and eccentric. And by another measure, she's also intelligent. She's a smithy by trade. So she's always forging and tinkering. And then I moved that from like, well, what kind of dynamic will work with that? I gave her a half sister who was half goblin, half orc, who was cantankerous like a little green Tasmanian devil named Iggy. And that dynamic worked. And then the third one I came up with was, what else could I do? I thought about, what about a half orc who was atypical of half orcs, who was not like big and burly, but was actually just regular human sized. So he would be kind of a runt to other half orcs, and, someone who was highly intelligent. And that kind of spun off from that. Like, these characters were interesting to me. So that spun off into like, what would the setting in which these characters would, what would look interesting? What kind of setting would these characters be in? And so everything just kind of snowballed from there. And I kept coming up with a character who was at the time half Minotaur. She's her own species now. And, where can I squeeze in like a regular human character? I like to write atypical fantasy characters, right?
Okay.
So the Black Crown is an epic quest, epic fantasy style adventure story with a little bit of found family, a little bit of what's that word I'm looking for? Shoot. Oh, come on. Caffeine, don't do this to me now. Don't crash now. A little bit of found family, a little bit of political intrigue.
Okay.
Centered around a half orc prince named Ragoth, who his mother was a queen who was kidnapped by an infamous orc warlord, and that was his father. And the book starts with Rags. Ragoth has been living in isolation for most of his life because he's a bastard prince, and he's a bit of an embarrassment. He would be in a bit of embarrassment if it got out that his mother had, given birth to a half orc child. So he lives in this library wing, and he's a knowledge sponge. He's a bookworm. He's all book smarts, no street smarts. And through events, shenanigans happen. I won't spoil anything, but he's driven into exile and told that the only that he has to find his orc father's tribe, which is halfway across the continent. And he's picks up some friends along the way. And I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but I always like to, like I mentioned earlier, the atypical characters. Most half orcs, big, burly. He's, kind of, not, I won't say short. He's just average height, like 5'9", right? And he's got, he's, unlike a lot of half orcs, he's highly intelligent. And the initial push to, sorry, I'm out of breath a little bit. I've been talking a lot here, even more than when I host my own shows. Most of what's one of the longest running tropes in fantasy about main characters, the farm boy who leaves home, who answers the call to adventure, to rise up and become the hero, right? My farm boy is a bit of an asshole. Rags along the way becomes, disconnected from his family and the wealth and security that he grew up with, and he has to try and cross half a continent with, nothing but his own wits. So he naturally picks up a couple friends along the way. One of those that he picks up is a former son of a potato farmer named Cortland Lowhelm. Court, he's cantankerous. He's angry. He's always ready to, a bit pugilistic. He's always ready to fight. He runs afoul of a little elf named Denny, where you think about most elves in fantasy, right? They are, they're always shooting stuff with bows and flinging magic all over the place. Denny is the opposite of that. Denny is essentially helpless and is described that way and shown to be that way through the narrative. A lot of the character creation that I do falls into what I call the 3 C's of characters: contrast, complement, and conflict. And I use these, and I think back to team dynamics that worked in a lot of the stuff that I watched when I was a kid, right? Think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, probably one of the best team dynamics you can think of. When you've got an ensemble team cast, right? You don't want one character to outshine everyone else. You always want characters to complement each other, in that some can do something that others cannot, but you also want them to, so that is what brings about they have different personalities. That conflict arises. Right. That's where you get interesting team dynamics from, because they're conflicting with each other because they have different personalities. Rags is book smart.
It's smart. So important. Yeah. Conflict is one of the biggest things. Like, you have external conflict. Well, there's a battle going on. The village is being attacked. The weather is this way. It's that way. You have team dynamics, which also then plays into internal conflict of pride, ego, jealousy, guilt, fear, whatever else. And so what's interesting is I just got done arc reading a story. Love it. I won't mention it right now. I'll probably have the author on later, but there was a part where we were having feedback, and I said, this part of the book right here, you lost me because it didn't seem realistic. You didn't have conflict. You didn't have this. And it was one of those like, well, it's too late now. Like, we're going for publishing, but lesson learned. And one of the other things too was they said, just wait until you see my battle scenes. They're going to be in the future. I'm like, you already gave me a battle scene. You gave me this, and then you gave me this. Well, that's not a battle scene. I'm like, to you as the writer, but to me as the reader, this is my interpretation of your battle scene, because you didn't tell me any different. You didn't show me any different. I have no idea what's going to come in the future. Therefore, the 2 things that you gave me now, this is my perception. And hopefully the rest of the story is engaging enough to where I know that your battle scenes in the future are going to be epic. So yeah. So how did you approach your battle scenes, your conflicts, some of that stuff, without getting too many spoilers away?
Well, the revelation of the characters really came through early in the. Hold on, my screen went dark for a second. I had moved. Didn't move the mouse. Didn't move the mouse around all that much. Sorry, wife's texting me a question now instead of coming in here and asking me. I had this is probably one of the biggest revelations of when writing the book was this very early scene where all 3 characters are traveling together and they take refuge in a barn. And this was a important scene at the time. It was they, convinced this is where Court and Denny, who meet each other before they meet Ragoth. His nickname is Rags for short. Decide to, help him get to Dreadmore, which is where his father's tribe is. It's a lawless kind of wild lands overflowing with orcs and cutthroats. And they decide they're going to help him. And something didn't sit right. There's just this innate writer's instinct told me something about that didn't work. So I waited about a week and I went back and I reread the entire sequence and I realized something very shocking to myself. None of these characters were indistinguishable from each other in a conversation. In a three-way conversation, I could not tell the difference between these three characters. And I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yep.
Because my characters were not distinct. They were just, it was three voices with the same character. So that was when I made the big change. That was when I went back and I retooled. Court was the biggest change. I thought Court in the same way of like an antagonistic best friend, the kind of friend that says, nobody gets to kill you but me. And I lean towards some of the best examples like Bakugo from My Hero Academia or Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z.
Vegeta.
Or, the guys that give you shit when things are calmed down, but when it's time to fight, you're glad they're on your side.
Yeah.
And or Knuckles from Sonic and Knuckles, just somebody that's always there. That was the biggest change for him. That's where he became much more angry and always in the book, he's always throwing out colloquial slurs, calling someone a festering piss bucket or something like that. It's actually kind of hard to come up with an original slur, an original country slur every time he started yelling, because he yells a lot in the book. And Denny became much more demure. Denny is a member of a sect of religious goodwill workers called the Unexalted Faith. So Denny is very demure and subservient and is not willing to fight because it's against his tenets. So,
ooh, you already got a new.
Oh,
fan
thank you,
here.
Jane. I'd love to share an e-arc. I've got some e-arcs ready for anyone that wants to give it a try. Even though the book's been delayed, I'm always happy to have that little bit of feedback, because it's not too late to change some things. And they inevitably figure out that between them, they've only got one sword with Court, and I changed that whole thing up, and it made the dynamic of the characters so much better. And not long after that scene,
when you were saying that you were sorry to interrupt you, but when you had three voices in your head, was there a specific voice, like actor, actress, that you had inside your head for these characters?
Not particularly. Generally, they're all for me, because I have such a vivid imagination. They're all just very distinctive to whatever's going in my head. I think initially I did want Rags to be more like firing off a lot of big words and things like that made him stand out. And then I found out it kind of made the dialogue a little more clunky and difficult to read. So I kind of eschewed that for just, a little more of a straightforward dialogue, although he does occasionally use that. The other character's like, what did you just say?
Okay.
Not long after that scene, they meet up with the fourth, one of the main characters of the book. They realize they need protection, so with the little bit of gold they have, they pay a veteran adventurer to help escort them.
That's such a D&D thing too.
Right. Yeah, and if you were looking at it in like D&D terms, these three are like level 1 newbies, and they hire like a level 10 to escort them, right? And her name is Valmora. She is, you could best describe her as like a half minotaur, because she's got a human head. In the book, she's actually what's called an orc, a subspecies of minotaurs. She's about 140 years old, so she's a veteran adventurer. She's fought in wars. She's a former arena champion.
Nice.
So she knows what she's doing, and she's a bit on the exasperated side because she's on hard times, and she doesn't want to go adventuring with a bunch of kids who are green as grass, but she needs the money. So she's like, all right.
We will do some shady adventuring for some gold.
Yeah, one more escort job for the road. So there's a lot of exasperation on her part, but even though she does, eventually warm up to everybody, because Valmora was very much the kind of commentary. I don't like to create characters that are commentaries, but one thing I don't like, again, back to that atypical character thing. One thing I've never really cared for in especially books is this notion of the binary between strength and intelligence. That's a game mechanic thing. That's not a real life thing. And if you watch interviews with guys who are like, say, bodybuilders or professional fighters, like, these are not stupid people. So the idea that that the heavy of the group has to be somebody who's a lumbering oaf, kind of just, this brutish dumbass, has never sat well with me. So Valmora is Mora is definitely not that kind of character. Is very much world weary and experienced, knows a lot of what's going on, but is also the kind of character that doesn't need to show off. Just sit back in
Right.
the back of the room with the arms crossed, and just doesn't have to prove they're the strongest and baddest motherfucker in the room. Granted, she's 7 feet tall, so usually most people don't want to fight with her, but if she can avoid a fight with a little bit of intimidation, she will, because getting in fights gets you in trouble with the law.
Right.
And some of the baddest dudes I've ever known when I trained jujitsu, especially, like, were some of the nicest people. Like, not oafs, not brutish, not egotistical.
Yep.
They were very laid back people, and I kind of wanted to carry that over to her character, because she's the big sister that's babysitting the group essentially, and has to step in occasionally and do the big sister thing, and be the one to say, "No, we're not going into the dark forest. Nobody that goes in there comes out."
Right.
And when
That's
you take these kind of that to me is what's always worked best, is when you take these kinds of characters, no matter what situation you kind of throw them in, even if it's blasé, a good character interaction will help propel a good book forward, even if your plot can be a little bit basic at times. You look at a show like Archer that had very good, distinct characters, even if a lot of them were assholes. They had one episode of that show where they were all stuck in an elevator for an entire 20 minutes. But because of the characters they were, and the writers knew how to make those characters interact, it passed by the time, and it was a hilarious episode.
I never saw that episode, but now I want to go find it, because Archer is one of those shows where I don't normally watch it, but whenever I do, it's never really a bad time. You almost always will get a laugh out of it at some point.
Oh yeah, it's gotten a little long in the teeth, I think, in the later seasons, but
Right.
definitely most of it's still funny. I just think if sometimes when a show goes on too long, you get kind of used to its style of comedy and interaction, and you just kind of become immune to it. Sometimes you got to bow out when
Yeah.
Oh,
Awesome.
yeah, it's so that's the setup for the Black Crown, and as they go through, there's a lot of things going on. When it comes to the conflicts, I do always have something to try and help keep the plot moving forward. Rags is being pursued by nefarious forces, and he's not always forthcoming with them about who he's being trailed by. So he kind of, they're like, "Who's chasing us?" He's like, "No, I paid you to escort me, not to ask questions." A couple scenes like that, and going off the beaten path sometimes results in winding up in different sorts of dangerous situations.
Right.
So and once they get to Dreadmore, I'll have to cut it off there, because spoilers, and believe me, this is not a book that you want spoiled ahead of time. I definitely think this is a book that is best done going through and blind reading.
So
The thing that I hope the most, TJ, is that people just read it and have fun with it and enjoy it. And when they close it, they say, "Oh, I like that." That's really all I want from any of it, is just people to, be able to go back and enjoy entertainment the way we used to, just sit back and enjoy something and not have to worry that the author secretly hates me, or they've got some kind of agenda that they're trying to push, or some commentary on modern life. I don't want modern life in entertainment. Modern life sucks.
That's why,
with the day.
we want to get away from reality. We want to be teleported into a world that is completely different from our own.
Yeah, and that's at the very least, that's what I promise people when they pick up my book. You can nitpick my story, or you can not enjoy it, but you won't sit there and be thinking about the economy while you're reading.
Well, you also brought up a great point, and I've mentioned this before. I know I've even talked to my buddy Ryan, who was on the stream earlier. Don't know if he's still around or not, but it was one of those things where I said, sometimes readers need to be a little more gracious to authors, especially young authors and indie authors, where they're like, "Well, this isn't a Stephen King or a George R.R. Martin." You're right, because it's book number 1, my first one I've ever done. So don't give me a little bit of slack here,
I just realized I have slides of the characters.
Oh,
If you
nice.
wanted to share them. I
Absolutely.
forgot.
Go ahead and
I
throw
forgot I
those
had
up,
that
man.
through my StreamYard. Let's see here. Let's see. The best one that I have on it, I do not have the most recent picture of Rags that was done by artist Neutron Boar, which is fantastic, but I do have some other ones. All right, this one I'm sharing, that was one of the more recent ones. That's a really good one by a fantastic artist. That's Valmora. I think, wait. Okay, you have to add it to the stream. My bad.
Oh, I do?
Yeah, it's good. It's on your end. I can't do it if I'm not the host.
Whoa. I don't even know how to do that, bro.
No better time to learn than live in front of an audience.
Am I doing this through share screen?
Yes. Slides. Yeah, share. I guess so. Share. Yeah. Well, you click on the picture, it'll say add to stream.
Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay. I was in
There we
full
go.
screen. That's why. Silly me.
Yeah, there we go. That's Valmora. That's my heavy. And yeah, this was a fantastic commission that I had done. That it got her perfectly, 100%.
Let's get rid of this overlay so we can see her in her full glory. So now your artwork is going to be in the book as well, correct?
No. These are commissions that I had done mostly for the purposes of promotion, and so people could see what the characters look like, and also I could find an artist. That was a desire that I had in order to for the book was to I have an artist who does really good sketch work. I'll share that one next. The artist that did this one, Denny. This is Denny. And I was trying to find artists who kind of I could work well with and were also within my price range. And this artist is wonderful. It nailed Denny first time. Like this was absolutely Denny 100%. And
Nice.
The whole vibe is completely that character throughout the whole book. Always looks a little bit worried. And I'll work that into the book's narrative a little bit, where Rags, while he's traveling, is kind of sketching stuff that he sees in a traveling notebook he has, and then he says, "Is that me? Why do I look worried?" He says, "I don't know. Are you worried?" Says, "I don't feel worried."
Right.
I think I photo bashed one of no, that's don't mind me. I didn't.
Oh, you're good, dude.
No, I didn't. This was the first commission that I had of Rags. By a different artist, and that's pretty good. That sums up what he looks like pretty much in a bit of his royal garb, although the color scheme's a little bit wrong. But the artists, I always give them a little leeway when they draw for me, and they add a little embellishment or they change a little something. It's not a big deal. I would say that Rags is a little more conventionally handsome, because his mother is an exceptionally beautiful woman. So some of her good looks kind of came over. He looks less like a half orc and more like just a green human with, the tusks and the pointed ears.
I'm assuming Jane's laughing at me and my my inexperience in getting streams going. So
I went through those times too. It's the best way really to, learn on the fly like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Just wait till you're on the stream with somebody and your computer program your PC crashes or something, and they're still streaming without you.
I remember that. That was funny. He did a great job. Just like, okay, I guess it's just me now.
Man. He did a fantastic job. And really, John Sport, that's why he looks worried in the image. Yeah. That was funny. I like to do a lot of character interactions that. Yeah. And I've got a picture of Court. It's not my favorite, but it's and I'm going to have some different ones done. But I described the guy, described to the artist what Court's like, as like, he should look like he's about ready to fight. He's got crappy armor and crappy sword because he's kind of dirt poor. I said I said, draw him angry. Draw him like a guy who's too angry to die, and that's what he put in the art.
I love his facial expression though that he captured on Court.
That's what I told the artist. I said, look, just make him look like he's angry. a little really cocky. That's one thing about Court. He's always, not only is he always ready to fight, but the impetus for him coming into the journey, he originally started much more straightforward. He just wanted to be an adventurer, and he still has that. I asked myself, what would happen if Gaston from Beauty and the Beast
Yes.
decided, you know what, fuck this town, I'm better than this. And rather than be a big fish in a small pond, he decided to go out and be a bigger fish in the ocean. And that's kind of what Court's impetus for wanting to become a knight is. He's like, hey, he's the biggest, the tallest dude in their town. He's the toughest. He can fight anybody, but he doesn't want to be the biggest guy in town. He wants to be someone of much more bigger prominence. A little egotistical on his part, but he's egotistical that way. He wants to be a knight because he knows that he's good enough to be one, and he wants to prove that he's good enough to be one. And he gets sent on he kind of leaves of his own accord after talking to a knight that tells him, look, if you want to be a knight, being a guard in the city is not the way to do it. And so
Straight
that's what
up.
he's glory chasing through it, and resents a little bit the fact that he's saddled with Rags, who he thinks is just they don't know he's a prince. They think he's just a base-born half orc. In my world, they're called Orcborn, referring to half orcs. But there's a derogatory term for them called orc brats. So he thinks Rags is just an orc brat. So he's resents that he's settled with a helpless elf and an ordinary orc brat, but he doesn't want to go back because that would be admitting failure. So he keeps kind of going forward with them.
Yes.
And
yeah. I love that life lesson too. It's the whole thing of like, you know what, just stop talking and start doing. Don't talk about being an author. Do, right. Be an author. Don't talk about being a chef. Go and be a chef.
Yeah.
So I like that.
You've got to shit or get off the pot,
Yep.
And there's a clip. One of my favorite, it's not even all that well known. It's one of my favorite clips from pro wrestling. It was a promo that Triple H said to Seth Rollins one time. And granted, it was from a bad guy's point of view. He's trying to get him to sell out and join the company, whatever. But what he said was very poignant. He said, you get one shot on this in life, one chance. That's all you get. You grab life by the horns and you make it give you what you want. And that was always kind of poignant to me, a little forcefully delivered, but it's true. He also says in that same promo, he says, if people don't hate you, how did he phrase it? If you ain't making enemies, you ain't making money. If you are not making enemies, you are not living up to your potential. I think there's a truth to that, because you look at when you start to succeed, inevitably, if you find that key to success, and inevitably you're going to have detractors, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a very, very harsh thing that a lot of people don't quite know how to deal with. They do not know how to deal with. Some people don't know how to deal with the harsh criticism. They might, buckle if they get a 1-star review, but some people just, can't handle negativity in general. You've got to have a thick skin to be an independent creator, because inevitably you're going to get not just critics, but you're just going to get people that don't like you. Yeah, you're going to get people that outright hate you for what you're doing, because you're not doing it the way they mentally feel you should be.
I have a fellow author buddy who his mindset is, okay, you want to give me a 1-star review, meet me at this location and we'll fight. If I win, you take it down because you have no idea what you're talking about. If you win, okay, I guess you can keep the 1-star.
That's a hell. I kind of respect that.
I absolutely do too.
I respect the hell out of that. I respect anybody that's willing to throw fists over something like that, just to prove it as a matter of pride. But
so on Goodreads, just the other day, I got a 1-star review on Hunters, right? The Dying Breed Hunters. Nothing else. That was it. And I went onto their thing and I was like, weird. you picked up the book and read it all in one day and gave me a 1-star review. That's impressive, number one. And then I just was like, hey, the great thing on Goodreads, I can comment on your rating, because they didn't leave me a review, just a rating of 1 star. So I was like, I just commented, hey, sorry you didn't like the book. I would love to hear your thoughts on why you didn't like it. Reach out anytime. So for me, it's like, all right, I'll call you on your BS.
Yeah, that was another controversy that kind of kicked up in the indie author and reviewer space of they had this TikToker. Now, full disclosure, she says she's a comedian and that this was a bit she was doing, where she criticized somebody who gave her 4 stars arbitrarily and ruined her perfect 5-star record. Well, the book was real, so naturally everybody saw that and was disgusted by it, decided to go to the book and 1-star the hell out of it without even reading it. So, legitimate review bombing. And she says she's a comedian, but the book is real, I mean, was the book fake just for a bit? I think it was a little bit of cope on her part. Complaining about negative reviews is not going to get you anywhere. And just like attacking reviewers that don't care for what you're writing isn't going to get you anywhere either. There's a certain level of thick skinness. You have to move on and eventually just go on to your next book. I think some 1-star reviews you can kind of laugh at. One of my good friends, Ryan Williamson, the author of The Widow's Son, he, to this day, just the other day, he was laughing at this 1-star review he got where somebody left it and all they said was, it could have been epic. And I'm thinking, him and I are both thinking, like, what are they talking about? Because this is a book that's filled with vampires, steampunk tanks driven by buffalo soldiers, the Mexican undead, an Aztec lich, and a half Navajo, half black a gunslinger working for the U.S. government to stop it all, a Spanish ninja nun who wields knives and fights vampires, right? Like, what was not epic about all that? So you kind of have to acknowledge who's, some authors are, but you've got to have that thick skin.
So that's where, Jane says, I see authors very sensitive about reviews. And I'm sensitive to give reviews, but the truth is that you can't please everyone, and it's okay. I think I have no problems with negative reviews when it is about the material and the story. When you go negative about the author and your perception of who that author is as a person, that's when I have a problem, because it's like, clearly you're hating on me, not the material per se. So yeah, but I think at the same time, it's so crucial for people to review work and to also be critical and critique, because as an author, how am I going to get better if you don't tell me I would have loved more of this, or this is something I think you can improve on, or I would have loved to have had more information on this. So, as Jane just said, right. It's an emotional review for them. It's not.
At that point, a review that attacks the author is more of a review on the author than what the author actually wrote. It's and generally that's why I don't actually give like a star rating when I do my book reviews. Generally, like 95% of the time, I enjoy most books I read. It's just I enjoy them for different reasons. I'll enjoy a Weird West book for different reasons than I'll enjoy a pulp style novel. I'll enjoy Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson for a different reason than I enjoy Mystic Reborn by Jeffrey Speight. They're different authors with different perspectives, and they write different kinds of stories. So as a reader, I really just like to say, okay, what's the story that this author's trying to tell me? How did it get delivered? And, I'm not sitting there being overly critical about it, because most of the time I enjoy what I read. That's all there is to it.
I think it's one of those things too, where, like I said, right, when you go from reading someone like a John Grisham who's been in the industry for years, and then you find someone independent, you go with your own filter there. Whereas, especially at least for like a movie, The Lost King, saw it on the streaming service, had no idea what it was about, didn't even watch the trailer, just clicked on it objectively with an open mind, open perspective. Absolutely incredible movie. So well done. It's a slow pace. It's not an action. It's not necessarily a thriller. It's just this slow paced, dramatical story, but it was so well done, so well acted. Absolutely loved it. And so I think sometimes we go into this with this perception or this expectation of, well, this had better be XYZ. And then we get upset when, you know, oh, well, it didn't meet my expectations. Yeah, but maybe you were the one that hyped yourself up instead of just letting the author take you on the journey that the author wanted to progress you through at that pace with that detail, etc. Let's see. Jane's got something else for us here. I've learned 5-star reviews can be just as unhelpful for fans and authors. What is the book about? But sometimes a great idea can be written poorly. I do that. I myself am still learning active voice, showing, not telling. Oh, that's always something you get to work on. So I know writing is a craft, no matter how good your story is. My editors ripped me a new one over bogus details sometimes, and sometimes valid points, but I took it gracefully and work harder. Jane, what I will say is the hardest time for writing is going through the edits. When my editor sent me back the manuscript on both books, book 1 and 2, and seeing the red, it's one of the hardest mental things because it's so almost discouraging to go through, do the edits, and you just question, like, why am I doing this? Is this even good enough? But hopefully, once you get done with all the edits, get all that red blood out of there, take a day or two, then go back, reread your story, and see how much better it more than likely is. Or maybe you just need to find an editor who is more complementary to your writing voice rather than changing your writing voice as far as what you want to present.
Editors definitely help you become a better writer. My editor,
100%.
Morgan Newquist, was very helpful. And I was thankful for her because she fixed a lot. You know, they helped fix some things that even mistakes even I didn't know. And all the time I've been writing TJ, I don't know why I would occasionally write with POV changes in the middle of a narrative. I'm like, she's like, who is she? She'll come back to me going, who is this chapter actually from the perspective of? And I'm like, everybody.
So here's the thing. So I wrote book 1, I finished it. A month later, I started writing book 2. And I got like 80% of it done within 3.5 weeks. So literally, book 2 that comes out next week was written a year ago. There is a certain point in that chapter where I change point of views like 3 times. We go from our main character to Farah to someone else back to Liam. And it's the only time I've done it. But that was where I then read gosh, I forget the name of the book. It was basically like writing with a purpose or something like that. And that was like one of the big rules. They were like, never change point of views. So I was like, all right.
You can change point of views, but like put a little scene break in there. Put a little scene break in there just to, make
So
sure
I did do that.
your
Like,
reader knows the perspective has changed. I got a good friend and he's a very imaginative writer, but again,
pain is real, Jane. Pain is real.
Again, and I don't want to call him out, but you'll never read anything he's written. But bruh, he does not put scene changes in. He writes it all one block, and I'm like, dude, why you do this? He's like, it's my style. And I'm like, that's not a style. That's just frustrating.
Or it's arrogance because you don't want to learn how to make your skills better.
He's a nice guy.
Part of it.
He's a nice guy and he's a creative writer. I'll say that.
he is a creative writer. He took
he's got a good imagination. I've enjoyed some of his stories. He hasn't written anything in a long time because poor guy gets so blasted by work he can't sit down and focus on his writing. But it is what it is.
There's times when you have to come into writing and just be humble enough to say, TJ, is this really that important for you to have this? Is it that, or is that the hill you want to die on? Or are you trying to become a better writer to have a better story for your readers to enjoy?
And by the other side of that measure, editors are not infallible too. You know,
Oh yeah.
I have them more to fix the not just to fix like the grammar errors and things like that I'd probably be making forever. Because look, I ain't got an English literature degree. Okay, I'm self-taught. I learned to write just by sitting down and writing and reading a lot. So
Yep.
naturally, you know, there's stuff of mine that needs correcting, and to point out any like particular plot holes or anything that might not make sense, help me make a much better book in that regard. But she was like, dude, no present tense, and no. She fixed some things, but other things I was she's like, don't do this. And then I go and look at like some of the classics, classic novels that have been written, and like, is it present tense? I'm trying to remember present tense or present voice, and it's like all over the place. Like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, that was what my editor also said. You know, she said, TJ, at the end of the day, this is still your story.
Yeah.
My changes, think of them as only recommendations. At the end of the day, you do not have to accept them, and you can leave it the way you want.
If you really want to keep something that they want you to cut, even if it don't make much sense, like, hey, you can still, you're still the one that can pull the trigger on that.
Yep.
You know? But
well, brother, I think I know my D&D game is coming up here soon, so I need to start heading out for that.
Let's see how we're gonna go. Let's go. We're gonna go.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
19.
Yes. Because
Sweet.
my guys we leveled up to level 5. I am a Tiefling Druid Charlatan, and I'm going full charisma. I just keep adding nothing but charisma.
Quick little D&D story. My son and my neighbor are. I'm running an evil campaign for them. Right. One's a Oath of Conquest Paladin, and the other, my son's playing a necromancer bard who has a servant who is a barbarian that's undead. Right.
Nice.
Their last session was great. They had some knights sent to take them away, and like, there's too many knights for them to actually fight. And I thought they were going to fight. And I was like, oh, well, that's the end of the campaign then. No, they decided to go with them and stay and go on their trial. So it's a 3-day journey from where they got captured to the city where they're going to be held trial, right? The whole time, the paladin is just with them. They think the paladin's by himself. The bard is following. Now, the barbarian's undead, so he's actually stuffed in the bag of holding that they have, that the paladin has, right? He can't breathe. He's kind of like a D&D Pokeball. It's insane. He's just sitting in the bag of holding that the paladin has. The bard is falling behind, and like at night, all 3 days, the bard was like creating weird noises and creepy shit on the outside of the camp, and the paladin recognized what the bard was doing and was like trying to sow discord. Like, you went against the will of Bane, and now they're coming for you. Just by the end of these 3 days, like I was giving these guys levels of fear for how frightened they were. And by the end of those 3 days, he had managed to successfully pass all their stealth checks and intimidate all of the squad so much that out of the 12 soldiers that went there, 10 of them converted to Bane and were on the paladin side and turned against their own commander at the end. It was the best session I never prepared for.
That's awesome. Well, hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to Jane and Ryan, and I think it was Kyle was our other. Kyle.
Yeah,
for
Kyle.
tuning in
He dropped
live.
in to say hi. I think he's probably out by now. But thanks, Kyle, for dropping in, man.
Yep. Thanks so much, everyone. And please be sure, like I said, the links are down below in the description. You have John A. Douglas's social media stuff. You have Jane, Troy and his work there, and then our other friends, Katie and her husband. So definitely give these guys a follow, give these guys some love, and
hit me
John,
with a
thanks so
DM,
much
Jane, and I'll get that art to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. See, you got another fan right there. So John, thanks for coming on, brother. It's been fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, TJ. I really appreciate it, man. The chance to sit here and ramble and run out of breath and watch my brain malfunction in real time.
Yeah, it's been awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone. We're out.